Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of this avoiding debt series. And last week we talked about avoiding consumerism debt. This week we are talking about student loan debt. If you don't know, I have a couple of videos on student loans, which I will link down below. There's a part 1 and part 2. I break down everything you really need to know about student loans. So if you already have them or you know for sure you have to take them out, then definitely watch those as well. But if you're trying to avoid student loan debt, which hopefully everybody is trying to avoid it at this point because it sucks, then keep on watching this video. I have a lot to run through, so I'm going to try my best to keep it as brief as possible. But basically, we're going to cover college decisions like where you're going, scholarships and grants, paying for books, housing, food, and so on. So the first thing I want to start with is be smart about where you decide to go to school. I highly recommend that you stay in state because I promise you, going out of state for school is going to be way more expensive unless you have a scholarship, a full ride or something. But it probably won't make a difference in your future career. You can have just as good of an experience at an in-state university, and you can also get just as good, if not better, of a job than if you were to go out of state or to a college that you think would look better on your resume, because honestly, it probably won't look that much better. The other thing to consider when choosing a university or school to go to is to go to a community college your first 2 years. Personally, I think the people who are most fit for going to a community college the first couple years are people who are maybe older and starting school, or they do not know what they want to major in. They don't know what they want to do with their career yet. A community college is typically quite cheaper when it comes to tuition and fees because they typically have a lot less going on, because when you go to a larger college, a university, they have their sports teams, they have bigger gyms, they have all these things that they can upcharge you for, while a community college is typically a little bit cheaper. That is not always the case though. I will say that I personally don't think I would have appreciated going to a community college my first 2 years. I did live on campus and I took quite a few core classes during that time as well, my first 2 years, and I honestly don't think it would have been the same experience if I were to have gone to a community college first. You also have to watch out for the courses if they can carry over to the university, because that can add up as well. So if you're taking a finance course at a community college, that may not count toward your degree when you transfer over to a university. So that's something to think about because it could end up costing you more money anyway. It is something to consider though. I think the main thing is just learning how to avoid student loan debt. And the number one best way to do that is to go to school in state. Now, while you're in college, there are a few major costs. So that's gonna be tuition and fees, which I'm gonna put together. So tuition is covering your classes in order to pay for the professors and all those sorts of things. And then the fees are gonna cover like admin fees and the rec fee, student center, sports, transportation, and tuition is typically several $1,000s. And then the fees are, for me at least at a university, it was about $1,000, $1,200, around there. But I think basically those two can go together. Then you have books, you have living expenses, housing, and you have food. Of course, transportation and parking may be a thing as well, depending on your situation. So let's run through those things, and I'm going to talk about your options when it comes to that. So the first major thing are scholarships and grants. So scholarships and grants typically do not have to be paid back, especially scholarships. And scholarships are something that you typically need to qualify for or apply for. There are some scholarships that are a lot easier to get access to. For example, in the state of Georgia, they have something called Hope Scholarship. And basically, your GPA from high school allows you to qualify it. I think it needs to be over 3.0 or 3.5, I can't remember. But then you need to maintain that GPA throughout undergrad in order to keep qualifying for the scholarship, and they cover a percentage of the tuition. So I believe it keeps decreasing each year, but I want to say when I was in school, they were covering maybe 70% of just my tuition, but it was a few $1,000s each semester, which of course is helpful. And I didn't really need to do anything for that aside from apply on the FAFSA website. So I will link that down below. Obviously that's only for the state of Georgia, but a lot of states have these sorts of things. You don't have to write an essay or anything like that. Of course, you may qualify if you're an athlete or an honor student or something for other scholarships. But a lot of the times you have to do a little bit of work, or a lot of work, honestly, to qualify for other scholarships. And this is where I made a mistake, because I was aware of scholarships that I could apply for. I just was too lazy to write the essays that went along with them. I really didn't want to do that. Looking back, for sure, I wish I did that, but hopefully I can convince at least one of you to do that, because I promise you, an essay when you're 18 or 19 is worth it when you're 25 and beyond that, and you don't have to pay for that amount of debt. A really good resource that I found for looking for scholarships is Anthony O'Neill's website. Anthony O'Neill is a well-known financial guy. He is one of the characters on Dave Ramsey's show, but he also has his own website and his own businesses and stuff like that. And so I'm gonna link his scholarship search thing that he has on his website, because you can break it down by your grade, you can break it down by where you live, your major, things like that. And from what I was looking at, it looked like there were a lot of options, and then you can see what the requirements are for each scholarship. Other than that, you can look through your university that you're going to. It may be specific to your university, and of course, just Google. You can Google some scholarships that you may qualify for. Grants, on the other hand, are another thing where you typically don't have to do much work. It's just based on income. So I know for myself, when I started college, I believe I got the Pell Grant maybe 3 or 4 semesters, because after that, my father's income was considered too high, which was absurd because it is well below 100,000. And so it's a bit frustrating when it comes to that, because a lot of people don't qualify for grants, even though, you know, our parents didn't save up money or enough money to cover our tuition. And so we do not qualify for those grants. This is another thing where it will be under the FAFSA website when you apply for financial aid through FAFSA, which everybody should, because even if you don't qualify for anything, or you don't think you'll qualify for anything, it's important to still apply for financial aid through FAFSA. Through that, you would receive the grants, and these are government funded, so there is typically a limit that a university has or a state has, and not everybody qualifies for it, and it's not that much. These also typically come with requirements, so you have to stay in school in order to not have to pay the money back. You have to probably maintain a certain GPA or maintain full-time status or anything like that. So always be careful to read when it comes to your scholarships and grants what the specific requirements are in order to not have to pay them back. So typically you don't have to pay either back. And these are the best case scenario, because it is free money for you to study and it should be taken seriously. So when it comes to those two, the main thing is to make sure you actually apply for financial aid through FAFSA. Do that as soon as you can, each time that it becomes available, and then make sure you maintain those requirements that are needed so that you don't have to pay them back, because that will be debt. I also want to add that if you are over the age of 24 and considered low income, it will probably be a lot easier for you to qualify for those grants, because when you're under the age of 24, you're typically considered a dependent of your parents, and even if you aren't, it's really difficult to use your income for those numbers. From the research that I was doing, I believe there's a way to work around that to the point where you are considered an independent and you get to report your income, and so you may be able to qualify for larger grants. But it is a little bit frustrating when it comes to that, because typically your parents' income, if it's high enough, it's really not that high, you won't qualify for many grants. The next thing I want to discuss are books in college, because typically when you look at the cost of going to school, you'll see on there that books are going to cost you like $1,000 or more a semester, and that is typically not true. I will say the main exception of that is probably law students, because I think they have really expensive books that are required for a lot of cases, but I honestly don't know. Now, I do know that you should never pay for your books in full. Like, never buy them brand new, because there is absolutely no point of doing that, because you probably don't want to hang on to these books once you're done with them. So first things first is make sure that they're even necessary for you to purchase. When you register for a class, do your research on whether or not the book is required. You can ask other students. There are websites of I think it's like ratemyprofessor.com or something. I don't know if that's even still up, but I know when I was in school, I would go and read those reviews to see if people used the book or if it absolutely was not even necessary. So first, make sure you actually even need the book and which version, if you could get away with an older version or just get away with not using it at all. The other options are to share with a good friend of yours. Maybe you have a roommate or something like that. You're taking the same class, so you guys want to share the book. The other thing is to find the book online for free. Oftentimes you can find these ebooks for free. You can purchase them used from people that go to the same school as you do. I did this all the time. There was a Facebook group that was like Georgia State University Book Exchange, and people would post the photos and the prices of whatever it was that they were selling, and I would do the same, and then we got to meet on campus. I would purchase it, whatever, I would sell it, and that is how I got a ton of my books. Also, check out eBay or Amazon. You can typically find books for half the price because they're used. And before, I would shop on half.com for books, but whenever I type that in, it just goes to eBay. It was always eBay, but now there is no half.com. Half.com was exclusively for books, but I'm assuming you can still find used textbooks through eBay as well. And then of course you could rent textbooks. Sometimes this is through the university, or you can do it through a website like Amazon or Chegg. I'm not sure what else there is right now, but there are options out there for you to rent the textbook and then return it at the end of the semester. Next up is housing, wherever you are going to live while going to school. Of course, you could live with your parents and commute to work, or live with a relative, and that is a great way for you to save money. But if that is not an option, then I would highly suggest living off campus. So living on campus does have its perks, but I will say it was very expensive, and that is what ran up a lot of my student loan debt my first couple of years, because I lived in pretty nice dorms my first 2 years. I had my own room basically, and I had a kitchen, things like that. So where I went to school, the dorms are very nice, and you pay a pretty hefty price for that. So if you live off campus in an apartment, it still may be expensive, but if you have roommates, then you will lower the price, of course, of what you need to pay each month, and that is a much better deal versus living with roommates on campus. Having more roommates on campus does lower the price that you pay, but not by much. Not how much it would if you were to live with a total of 4 people in an apartment. You would save a lot of money that way. The other option with living on campus is to try to be a RA, a resident assistant, I believe it stands for. And I know that my cousin does this, and so her living expenses are completely covered. She gets to live on campus for free, and then of course you would have the responsibility of the floor that you are living on, and it's typically I would assume freshman students or sophomore students beneath you, and you typically have to do some sort of activities and stuff like that. But living for free, that's pretty ideal in exchange for doing that, and then I believe you get paid on top of that as well. The other thing about living on campus, and the next topic we're going to cover, is food. Because a lot of times when you live on campus as a freshman, they require you to get a food or meal plan. This was not the case for me because my dorm rooms always had kitchens. However, there were some dorm rooms that did not have kitchens. It was just like a bedroom and a closet shared with somebody else. And so you had to get the meal plan also, which is very, very expensive. So I've never had a meal plan. I know that the food is probably pretty good, but it does add up. You know, several thousand extra per semester for food is not necessary. So ideally, if you're living in a dorm room that has a kitchen, then you can cook your own food. You just need to budget for your groceries. And then of course, if you're living in an apartment, for sure it should have a kitchen, and you should be, again, budgeting for your groceries and cooking at home, because this is also an important time for you to learn to live on your own and cook your own meals, learn how to cook in general. I think it's absurd that A lot of people don't know how to cook when they're an adult because it's an important thing, you know, it can save you a lot of money, it's a lot healthier for you, and college is the perfect time to start developing that. When I was in school, it blew my mind how often people would get coffee and go out to eat while they were in school. These were people the same age as I was or a little bit older, some of them younger than me, and they were getting coffee every day because I don't know, they were just living that college lifestyle. And you can make your own coffee. You can make your own meals most of the week. A lot of times people were just blowing their money on coffee and food when that is absolutely not necessary. You can study in a coffee shop without purchasing coffee each time, or you could study in the dorm rooms and make your own coffee or something like that in the library. But definitely avoid that weird college lifestyle inflation because that will cause you to go into further debt as well. Something really important I want to include in this as well is refunds, because I think a lot of people do not understand student loan refunds. I worked at my university's bookstore for a little over a semester, and people kept using their refund money. It would go to their little ID card, and they were using their refund money to purchase the clothes, like merchandise for the university, hoodies, pants. They would purchase laptops, they would purchase calculators, fancy pens, books, things like that. And I was like, how do I get these refunds? And so I called up financial aid because I had no idea how people were getting these just free money is what it sounded like, because when you hear refund, it sounds like free money. And they told me that that's because you did not take out more student loans than you needed, so you do not qualify for the refund. So what I realized is that all these people, because I was a cashier at the bookstore, it was a ton of people just ringing up thousands of dollars of crap they did not need, were literally using their debt to purchase all these things. I'm not sure if they knew that, but I'm sure now they know. So a refund from your student loans does not mean you should blow it. So you should not be buying coffee with it, computers with it, anything like that, because that money you still have to pay back. So beware of a student loan refund. I just wanted to put this in this video. I don't know if I mentioned it in my student loan ones, but avoid that. Now, if you're watching this video, you're probably somebody who is trying to figure out how to avoid student loan debt, and therefore your parents are not paying for your student loans or paying for you to live necessarily. With that being said, I highly recommend you work a part-time job, and with that part-time job money, save it or pay off your debt in advance. I worked pretty low-paying jobs while I was in school, especially when I lived on campus, and so I really didn't have much to save because I would literally use all of my paycheck on my groceries. It was that small, and I was only working a few days a week because I was also a full-time student. However, later on, when I was in grad school, I was actually working 2 jobs while I was in school full-time, and I probably could have done a much better job at budgeting my money and saving my money and putting it toward my debt at the time, but I did not do that. So I highly recommend you save your money, stockpile something, put it in a high-yield savings account, or start paying your debt down as you go. There are a lot of jobs on campus that you can apply to. I know that a couple of good ones would be you can do tutoring, which you can charge any price that you want to. Also being an SI leader, so that's like supplemental instruction, and they would typically teach for an hour or 2 each week, and it was basically like an extra study session for students, and I used to attend those all the time, and I remember really appreciating those SI leaders. Like I said, being a resident assistant, obviously you could work any other part-time job. Being a server is really a good one to do in college because you're going to be getting a lot more money than most other jobs. And another one to look out for are companies that reimburse your tuition. So if you work for them for a year or something, or whatever amount of time is required, they may help you to pay some of your tuition, which is obviously a really good thing. When it comes to grad school, really all of these tips apply as well, but one main thing that I experienced was being a TA, which is a teacher's assistant. So my tuition was completely covered when I was in grad school, so I did save quite a bit when it came to that. But if you know my story, you know I still took out student loans to live I did take out too much. And I also still had to pay for fees, but my tuition was completely covered. And then I received a monthly stipend on top of that of a few $100. And basically all I had to do was teach a class twice a week. And it was just like a lab for an hour or whatever. And I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. And that went along with the research I was doing, but I know that this is available to many majors, but I was teaching a class on my own. I did research, and so I got paid for that in exchange, and my tuition covered in exchange for that, which is a really good option because you are getting your money, but also gaining experience with teaching and interacting and just getting better at your skills. So that's a major thing to look out for when it comes to grad school, because a lot of times you will get your tuition covered. And then my final tip is to do well in school, because a lot of people don't realize that it does require a lot of time, depending on your major, of course. But I know for me and my peers, we had to study a lot. And the people who didn't show up to class and didn't take things seriously, they either failed the class or they completely dropped out or they changed their major, which also costs more money. And that is a huge mistake, because you can take this seriously and finish school with a good GPA. And if you maintain your GPA, you typically keep those scholarships that I was talking about at the beginning, because they have requirements. And you also finish school in the right amount of time or in less time, which also saves you money. So, typically a bachelor's degree should take 4 years or less, and that's by being a full-time student every semester. But if you fail a class, or if you change your major too much or do anything abnormal, then you will be in school for a lot longer, which means you are going to have to pay another semester or two of fees and tuition and everything else that comes with that. It's also important to avoid classes that you don't need to take, especially your freshman year. I can't remember what the class was called, but basically it was some seminar that a lot of freshmen fell for because the university made it sound like it was required, but it absolutely was not. And I know that this happens for a lot of freshmen, and those couple of classes can add up. The credits are equivalent to how much you're going to be paying with tuition. And so if you're taking these pointless classes, then you are just wasting money and time. So really pay attention to the requirements for your major. Talk to a good advisor, but better yet, talk to somebody who's already gone through school, because that is how I avoided taking those unnecessary classes. Is I knew a sophomore when I was becoming a freshman. So they helped me out and I avoided those unnecessary things. I think that's it. Obviously that was a lot of information, so hopefully you took some notes, and I will put the timestamps down below in case you need to go back to something and jot some things down. Be sure to also watch my student loan videos, as I mentioned, because if you already have student loans, or if you know for sure you are going to be taking them out, then you want to be aware of what you're actually putting under your name. I know for me that in order for me to finish in the time that I did, I would have had to take out student loans, even if I was working and saving my money better, and even if I lived off campus. So yes, I did take out more loans than I needed to, but I know I still would have had to take out some financial aid, because I wouldn't have been able to pay for the $20,000 plus that it would have cost me outside of everything. However, I do wish I applied for scholarships and took them seriously, because I just completely ignored them. And looking back, I for sure would have written some essays to have some of this paid off now. But you are watching this, and if you are starting, hopefully you can learn from those of us who have gone through school and taken on too much debt, because it is not fun. But it is okay to take out those student loans. Just be smart about them and try to limit how much you do end up taking out. If I missed anything, please comment that down below for everybody to see. And if you have any questions, also comment that down below. I will answer to the best of my ability. That wraps up my little series for avoiding debt. And if you missed the avoiding consumer debt, then that will be linked down below for you to go watch. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video.